Welcome to another episode of The Unstarving Musician. Thank you for being here. I'm Robonzo. This is my podcast. We talk about music business stuff for independent musicians and artists of various disciplines, as well as industry professionals, all intended to help you build sustainable careers. By the way, what are you wearing? I always need to know this. I hope you're doing well. Hope your weather's great. Ours is pretty good. I'm doing well. Thank you very much for asking. A couple of music industry notes before we get into today's topic. About 2 weeks ago, the Rolling Stones released a video for their new single, In the Stars, which they did in collaboration with South Park creators Trey Parker and Matt Stone's AI company, Deep Voodoo. The video features de-aged versions of Mick Keith and Ron Wood. If you've listened to enough episodes of this podcast, you've gathered that I am a lifelong Stones fan, and have to say, I like the video. I've gathered that a lot of folks don't care for the AI deep fakeness of it, and I get it. Maybe taken too seriously, it's weird or otherwise not good. It is a little weird, but it's mostly a beautifully done video. The new Stones album, for anyone else who's a big fan, Foreign Tongues is the name of it, is set to release July 10. I'm excited to hear the rest of it. Another bit of industry news, Pete Townshend, co-founder of The Who, the guy who wrote pretty much everything you know by The Who, just signed a partnership with Primary Wave. The new deal is for his name, image, and likeness, what the industry calls NIL. It's not a catalog sale. A lot of that going around. Townshend actually sold his publishing interest back in 2012 to a different company. What this NIL deal means in practical terms is that Primary Wave gets to commercialize Townshend, the person, his face, his persona, his brand, across things like merchandise, documentaries, brand content, sync placements, and probably AI and likeness licensing. They're also building out his social media presence, which he's never really had as a solo artist. The reason I'm sharing this with you is that NIL is becoming its own revenue category in music, separate from publishing and master rights. For legacy artists with strong personal brands, it's turning out to be a real income stream. And it's a reminder that the music business keeps inventing new ways to monetize what artists have built. Whether that's good or bad probably depends on which side of the table you're sitting on, but good for Pete Townshend. I wish him continued success with his creative endeavors. And now from the mailbag, this is a reader response from George Brandow, longtime listener of the podcast and reader of Liner Notes, the Unstarving Musician newsletter written by yours truly. This one was on why the best musicians don't always get the work. George said, quote, "I can't agree more. There's two musicians I hired once and only once. They're both brilliant, amazing musicians, but not dependable to show up on time or at all, let alone learning their parts, thinking they could wing it and jam their way through the set. It's kind of difficult on my side because I really want to hire them because it sounds so good with their talent. I was hired last month," George says, "and one of these guys I'm talking about was also hired. At rehearsal, I'm listening to him thinking he is so talented. The guy never showed up on the day of the gig. It just confirmed my decision in never hiring him again. Right on, brother." End quote. Thanks, George. I appreciate that. That particular edition of Liner Notes was on on the little things that musicians who get a lot of work do that goes outside of their talent, like showing up on time, being a nice person, having a sense of humor, being reliable, learning the stuff. You can check out Liner Notes, the newsletter, at unstarvingmusician.com/liner notes to read newsletters like the one George was responding to, learn a lot, get access to some cool resources. Check it out. All right, on to today's topic. How many times have you looked at a chord chart, seen something like a minor 7 flat, and just skipped it? Or played along with a song for years and never really understood why the chorus lifts the way it does? Or been offered a gig, a theater pit, a last-minute sub-call, a wedding band dep, and passed because you knew the charts would be sitting on the stand and you wouldn't be able to read them? If any of that sounds familiar, this episode is for you. I'm talking to the working musician who's been gigging for years, maybe decades, and has gotten by on ear, feel, muscle memory, and a handful of chord chops. You're not a bad musician. You're good enough that people keep calling. But there's a ceiling you've been bumping up against, perhaps. The ceiling that separates the players who can walk into any situation and the players who can only walk into the situations they already know. That ceiling is music theory, and specifically the ability to read music. I'm going to tell you up front, I'm one of those players. My education was on the street, so to speak. A few college classes, not my major, a lot of gigs, and a lot of listening. Full disclosure before I go any further, I haven't started this framework, the one I'm about to share with you. I haven't started it yet. A piano or keyboard is on my list, but it's behind some other things right now. A new home with a new studio among them. These days I'm pursuing more work as a vocalist fronting my own band with my drumming moving towards studio and recording work. Theory is something I keep coming back to, and this framework is one I'd follow when the timing works out. So, what I'm doing in this episode is sharing the roadmap because I think it's the cleanest one I've come across for adults and pointing to where I'm headed. This is a framework I wish someone had handed me about 20 years ago. It came from a conversation I had all the way back in episode 13. I believe this is 351. That conversation was with Dave Hamilton. Dave is a drummer, a vocalist, and a podcaster. He hosts Mac Geek Gab and co-hosts Gig Gab, the Working Musicians podcast. And importantly for today, he's a formally trained musician who actually uses that training to get work, reading charts, theater shows where he gets handed a drum book on the day of the performance and sight reads it. What Dave gave me in that conversation wasn't a plea to go back to school. It was a practical, adult-friendly roadmap. 4 parts. You can start this week. Today I'm breaking it down for you. Before the framework, let's talk about why this is hard for people like us in the first place. Because it's not a motivation problem. You wouldn't be listening to a podcast about music as a business if you didn't care about your craft. The problem is that most theory education is built for 19-year-olds in a conservatory or music school. It assumes you have 4 years, a practice room, a piano lab, and nothing else to do. You, on the other hand, have a day job, a family, a band, maybe a touring schedule, and about 45 minutes on a good day to actually sit down with an instrument. So, you try to learn theory the way it was taught to you, if it was ever taught to you at all, and you hit a wall almost immediately. The staff doesn't make sense. The intervals feel abstract. You memorized every good boy does fine, and then forget it by the next session. You give up because what you've learned has no obvious connection to the gig you're going to play Saturday. Here's the reframe. You don't need conservatory-level theory. You need enough theory to unlock the gigs and the musical conversations you're currently locked out of. That's it. And the path to that amount of theory is much shorter and much more practical than you've been led to believe. The other thing that stalls people out is choosing the wrong instrument to learn on. If you're a guitar player, you've had to learn theory on guitar. You already know the frustration. The same note, let's say C, lives in 4 or 5 different places on the neck. The fretboard is a beautiful instrument, but a terrible classroom. When you're trying to connect a note on the staff to a physical action, guitar gives you 5 possible answers to every question. That doesn't feel like theory. It feels like trivia. Which brings us to Dave Hamilton's first and foremost important piece of advice. There are 4 parts to this. They build on each other, so I'd recommend working them in order, but the first one is non-negotiable. Everything else sits on top of it. This is the single most important move you can make. Learn on a piano, even if piano isn't your instrument. The piano is the physical manifestation of the music staff. 1 note on the page equals exactly 1 key on the keyboard. No ambiguity, no choices. You see a C on the page, you play the C on the keyboard. You see a C sharp, you play the key right next to it. That's it. For a guitar player, a drummer, a singer, a bass player, anyone whose primary instrument has an ambiguous relationship with the staff, the piano is the Rosetta Stone, if you will. You don't need to become a piano player. You need to be able to plunk out chords and single notes with both hands and see the relationships laid out in front of you. You don't need a grand piano. You don't even need a full 88-key weighted keyboard. A basic MIDI controller or a cheap digital keyboard from a music store, 49 keys, 61 keys, will do everything you need. If you already have one sitting in a closet because you bought it during a project 5 years ago, go get it. And here's the part that most people miss. Tell whoever is teaching you that your goal is theory, not performance. This matters. A traditional piano teacher will start you on scales and simple melodies and technique. That's the wrong path for what you're trying to do if getting a handle on theory is your primary objective. You want to spend your time on chord construction, building triads, building major and minor chords, building sevenths, building diminished chords, and seeing and hearing those shapes on the keyboard. If you don't have a teacher, there are YouTube channels and online courses abound that teach piano from a chord and harmony angle rather than a performance angle. Okay, learning chord construction and the 1-4-5. Once you're at the keyboard, the first real theory concept to nail down is how chords are built. Triads, major and minor chords, sevenths, diminished chords. You're not memorizing these as abstract rules. You're building them at the keyboard in every key until your hand knows the shapes and your ear knows the sound. The unlock after that is the 1-4-5. The 1 chord, the 4 chord, the 5 chord in any key. This is the harmonic foundation of more popular music and songs than you can count. Blues, country, rock, folk, gospel, huge amounts of pop. Once you can find the 1, the 4, and the 5 in any key on the piano, you can play along with most of what's on the radio, or the Spotify, I should say. You've already unlocked most of the jams you'll ever sit in on. From there, you start to notice what's happening in the songs you already know. Oh, that chorus is going to the 4. That's the same progression as that other song in a different key. You're not memorizing theory anymore. You're starting to hear it. And everything you already know about music, all the hours of listening you've done, starts to turn into knowledge you can articulate. So part 3 of this is using guitar chord charts as your practical material. This is one of Dave's specific suggestions, and it's brilliantly practical. Guitar chord charts, the kind with the chord names written above the lyrics, are everywhere on the internet. They're free. They cover essentially every song ever recorded. And despite the name, they're not really guitar charts. They're just chord charts. The chord names work on any instrument. So here's the exercise Dave laid out. Pick a song you already love, one you've heard 100 times. Download the chord chart. Now sit at the piano and play through those chords while singing along, out loud or in your head, with the melody. The logic is simple. Because you already know how the song is supposed to sound, your ear will tell you when something is off. If what you're playing doesn't match what's in your head, something's wrong, and you'll have to figure out what. You get feedback without needing a teacher in the room. Do this with songs you love, and over time, you start to see patterns. The same progressions show up across songs in different keys. Choruses lift in predictable ways. Bridges go to predictable places. You're not memorizing theory, you're starting to recognize it. And if you play guitar or another chord instrument, Dave suggested taking the same chart and playing it on both instruments, back to back. He described the feeling as, quote, the synapses being burned, end quote. Doing exactly this, going between piano and guitar with the same chord chart. That image stuck with me. It's the kind of cross-instrument fluency that, as a learner, I can see the value of even before I've fully done the work myself. Part 4 is learn to read music as a separate skill later. Here's where we pivot from theory to a related but distinct skill, reading. Theory and reading are different things. You can know theory without being able to sight read. You can sight read without deeply understanding theory, although that's a bit more rare. But for a working musician, both skills compound. Theory unlocks understanding, reading unlocks gigs. Dave told me a story in that episode that I think about a lot. He was doing a benefit the night before we talked, cabaret-style show, songs thrown together last minute. Band didn't get the set list until 1:15 in the morning, the day of the gig. Downbeat was at 8 p.m. One of the tunes, I believe, he said, was the Money Song from Avenue Q. A show tune with multiple time signature changes, tempo changes, pauses, stops. Not something you're going to learn by ear in an afternoon. There was no drum book on the show's material. Dave told the organizers, if you don't have sheet music for the drums, we literally cannot play this song. What they were asking would take weeks to chart and learn by ear. But, and this is the key, he went online, found someone who had posted the drum book for that song, and downloaded it. And sight read it at the gig that night. Went great. Without reading, he'd have had to pass on the tune, and it would have been played a cappella or skipped entirely. That's the revenue case for reading, and it's concrete. Reading musicians get theater and pit gigs, wedding and corporate bands with large books, session work where you're handed a chart and expected to play immediately, last-minute sub-calls which pay well precisely because most players can't take them, church gigs with weekly changing repertoire, cruise ship and casino work. If you're a drummer, learn to read rhythm notation first and deeply. That's where most of your reading work will live. If you're a guitarist or bassist, learn both rhythm notation and chord charts. The Nashville number system is worth learning too. Horn players and keyboard players, you already know you need to read. The question is how fast. You don't need to become a virtuoso sight reader. You need to be functional, able to read a chart at a slow tempo in a rehearsal with a pencil in your hand. That baseline alone opens doors most of your peers have closed for them. All right, implementation. So the framework's clear, hopefully. How do you actually do this without quitting your job? So this week, get a keyboard in front of you, set it up somewhere you'll actually see it every day. If you don't, order a cheap 49 key or 61 key controller or find a used one on Facebook Marketplace or somewhere. This is the single biggest point of friction. If the instrument isn't physically accessible, none of this happens. Weeks 1 through 4, 20 minutes a day, 5 days a week, not 2 hours on Saturday. Short daily reps beat long weekend sessions for this kind of learning every time. Spend that 20 minutes on two things. First, building major and minor triads on every key, going around the circle of fifths, C major, G major, D major, A major, and so on. Then the minors. You're not trying to play them fast. You're trying to know where they live. Second, pick one song you love, download the chord chart, and play through it at the keyboard. Months 2 and 3. Add sevenths and diminished chords to your chord construction practice. Start identifying 1-4-5 progressions in the songs you're learning. Notice when a song goes to a 6 minor or the 4 or somewhere unexpected. Keep the daily 20 minutes. Add a second song per week. Month 4 onward, now bring reading into the mix. Start with a beginner method book for your primary instrument. Berkeley has good ones. Hal Leonard has good ones. Don't worry about speed. Read slowly, read accurately, read every day. Even 5 minutes of daily reading compounds faster than most musicians believe. This is a 1 to 2 year project to reach genuine functional competence, not a 30-day transformation. I want to be honest about that. If someone sells you a course that promises to make you a reading musician in 6 weeks, they're selling you a lie. But here's the offset. You don't have to wait until you're done to start getting value. You'll start hearing songs differently within the first month. You'll start taking on gigs you would have turned down within the first 6 months. The returns are cumulative and they start early. A note on teachers. If you can afford one, a good teacher compresses the timeline dramatically. A half-hour lesson every 2 weeks is enough to keep you on track, fix things you're doing wrong before they become habits, and keep you accountable. A lot of great working musicians teach on the side for reasonable rates, and many teach over Zoom now, so you're not limited to teachers in your zip code. If you can't afford one yet, YouTube and structured online courses will get you a long way. Just be disciplined about what you're learning and why. Here's what I want you to take away from this one. Theory isn't gatekeeping. It isn't a conservatory club. It's not something you needed to start when you were 12 to ever be any good at it. It's a practical skill set that expands what you can hear, what you can play, and what gigs you can say yes to. And the path for an adult musician is genuinely shorter than you think. If you choose the right tool, which is the piano, if you focus on the right concept first, which is chord construction, if you use material you already love, which is the songs in your rotation, and if you treat reading as a separate skill that compounds on top, it works. You don't need to become Dave Hamilton or any of the players you grew up idolizing. You need to become a better version of the musician you already are with a few more tools in the box and a few more doors open. As I continue this journey for myself, I'll keep sharing what I'm learning. If you want implementation depth resources on this kind of thing, frameworks, roadmaps, the stuff that goes deeper than a single episode can go, that's what Liner Notes Insider is for. It's a premium version of my Liner Notes newsletter from the Unstarving Musician. Recent editions have covered things like royalty recovery toolkits, release planning templates, revenue comparison calculators, the implementation layer beneath the episodes. Learn more at unstarvingmusician.com/liner notes. The free version, called simply Liner Notes, is where I'd recommend you start. Insider is there when you're ready for the deeper stuff. If you want to hear, by the way, the original conversation this framework came from, that's episode 13 with Dave Hamilton. I'll also put a link for that in the show notes. One of the earliest episodes of the show, and one I still go back to. Dave's Gig Gab podcast is also worth your time if you're a gigging musician. And a final thought. The thing I keep coming back to in my own practice is this. Every 20-minute session at the piano for any of us who commit to it is a small bet on the version of us who gets the call next year. The one who can walk into the theater pit, look at the chart, and say yes. That version of you is available. It just takes the work. As an independent podcaster, your support means the world to me. You could even say I depend on it. With that in mind, here are some things you can do to help support us. Follow us on your favorite podcast app. Leave us a review on your favorite podcast app. Or shoot me a review by email, robonzo@unstarvingmusician.com, that I can use on the website. Or just share this episode with a friend. This makes a huge impact on our audience growth. You could also visit our crowd sponsor page at unstarvingmusician.com/crowd sponsor to learn of the many other ways of supporting the podcast, including a quick and easy online tip jar. It's like click, tip, done, easy and super appreciated. The music you're hearing is New Gods Part 2, the instrumental mix by yours truly. You can hear the full version, download it or buy it at robonzo.com. And if all this was too much to remember or process, just go to the show notes for this episode at unstarvingmusician.com to find links to all the stuff talked about in this episode. You can leave us feedback, questions, comments, complaints at unstarvingmusician.com/feedback. Thanks for listening. Peace, gratitude, and a whole lot of love.